Hello today with the Dublin Conversations. Hello, Jim. Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name's Jim Hawker, and I am one of the co-founders of FreePipe.
And what do FreePipe do, Jim?
So we describe ourselves as a brand performance agency. We're running a lot of brand campaigns, but also performance marketing campaigns. So everything from top of the funnel sort of awareness to sort of conversion and transactional kind of marketing to persuade people to take an action or buy something or do something. So sort of full funnel marketing, really.
So, Jim, we're here today to discuss about the changes in the communications industry and how the communications industry works, where we witness greater fragmentation, yet at the same time convergence, and the need perhaps to rethink established ideas like advertising, journalism, marketing, public relations, and more. And can they be replaced with better ideas? And we've also got a new immense knowledge from different sources we can use. And we've really got the challenge of how can we co-create new ideas to do our jobs better and rise to wider society's challenges of growing distrust, divisive tribalism, or not being able to come together to tackle big challenges. And so really the 5 steps to Dublin is about how we maybe possibly unlearn some of our existing thinking, discarding any effective outdated ideas while embracing new ones. And really this question of what does better look like. So join us on our Dublin conversation, and we're going to go through these 5 steps to what we call Dublin window. And step 1 is really about at the heart of our universe, old school advertising and public relations, maybe in other disciplines, look to the world with themselves at the centre. And we're suggesting actually we need a bigger worldview where maybe at the centre is this idea of purpose that can be a business purpose, a creative or a social purpose. And then around that requires the need to establish confidence, confidence in yourself, that what you understand to be a reality is valid, confidence in who you are and your purpose and purposefulness, confidence in others, not to help, not harm you, confidence others having you in your purposefulness for how you help them. And maybe what we call zeitgeist confidence, a confidence or lack of that creates peace, wars, financial success, failure, and more. And we've got that we need to find out much more about this subject of confidence to give it bigger and deeper meaning. And if you want to create confidence, purpose provides an excellent vehicle, an ideal vehicle to provide coherence to your story of how you connect with others, more compelling to make you attractive and connect you more with others. So in terms of the sort of the need for a bigger worldview, Jim, how do you think that's important, and has that related to your experiences?
Yeah, I think it's in a way it's both a given but also a controversial sort of topic. And
in what ways controversial, Jim?
Controversial in the sense that we talk about things like greenwashing, but also increasingly we talk about purpose washing.
Yeah.
And I think there's been lots of organisations that have been quite rightly called out on talking about something but not seeing it through in terms of how they feel and then how they essentially behave. But I think there's a danger here that and actually I've seen it a little bit over the last sort of year or so, that a lot of organisations are going to external agencies like PR agencies to help them try and define what that purpose actually is. And actually I sort of argue that it should be done from within the organisation rather than from an external agency.
So an authentic expression from what's already there rather than needs to be manufactured and dressed up as. So, yeah.
And I think unless you work in the actual organisation, it's hard to get that sort of proper perspective on what that purpose should be. And then I think there's also a danger that when you manufacture that purpose through external partners, that you become like every other company with a similar sort of purpose. And I think it then becomes hard to differentiate one company from another when you're all talking about the same thing to some extent. And I think that sort of defeats the purpose if you're looking at it purely from a marketing perspective. But actually, I think it needs to come from within. It should be done in cooperation, but not defined by an external agency. And I think it still needs to be, ensured that it's well differentiated, because I think it doesn't have to be a central pillar of your external marketing. I think it's just defines why you come to work and want to make something happen. Whether that spills into your communications or wider marketing, that's a slightly different point. It doesn't necessarily have to be completely integrated. But I think there is a danger here that a lot of brands have jumped on this as an opportunity, especially over the last few years, for lots of different reasons we can go into. But there's been a pressure on organisations to respond to external factors around them when they don't necessarily have the internal capability or haven't done the thinking in-house before sort of coming out and claiming some things or changing external behaviours.
So it's an issue that carries some significant sort of health warnings and caveats in going forward with a greater confidence in your purpose, that we need to be mindful of those risks and dangers. In terms of going forward, inspired by the work of people like Professor Daniel Kahneman and other behavioural psychologists, the idea that 5 rules frame what you need to do to interact. So to successfully connect, you need to get known and noticed, liked, trusted, front of mind, and being talked about. And the Dublin conversation believes that this potentially could frame any campaign, that any work you do is doing one or more of these 5 things. Any observations here, Jim, about whether there's anything missing or need to add things, or what any priorities within these 5 things?
It's kind of obvious, right? I think the thing I think is interesting is the liked aspect of this.
Yeah.
I'm certainly seeing brands that they want to be universally liked, in the sense that they are creating division, they are creating tribalism, they purposefully antagonizing some audiences, but knowing that actually they're going to attract others by doing so. And I think it's actually quite a smart marketing technique, in the sense that you are creating or trying to engineer an emotional response around your brand. And actually, by having a sometimes controversial or strong point of view, you will undoubtedly attract a cohort of people that align in with your thinking. Because obviously the danger is no one can be liked by everyone. And, it's quite an interesting way of identifying the kind of people that align to your brand by coming out and saying something quite controversial. So, and there's lots of examples of this in the consumer marketing space every day. I think it's quite a smart technique, actually. When you've got a small budget and you need to make an impact, you are undoubtedly going to alienate some people, but you will attract others and engender a loyalty and passion and advocacy within that group.
So what do you think of the idea that the concept of liked is a bit of a paradox, in that you've got on one end of the spectrum people who like you, but then the other end of the spectrum, you've actually got people who like the idea of not liking you. So the significance there is sort of to create an emotional reaction, which is operates within that spectrum of likability, and that the opposite really is about being bland, as you say, like danger, like diluted. Is it possible ever to be universally liked? And the critical thing there is, as I say, to create a reaction as opposed to be anonymous and overgeneralized, perhaps.
Yeah.
Moving on, Jim, we'll talk about sort of the next step is about, it's an evolution of what was considered the PESO model within the communications industry. But the open is different in that they're not channels, but choices that can work in a goals, objectives, and strategic and tactical level of how you connect with others. And so the own is not just own media channels, but your own behaviors, your own reputation, even your own time, that it's possible to earn trust with by just spending time with someone. And also paid for codes beyond just advertising, but anything you paid for, earned beyond earned coverage, but also things like search engine optimization and word of mouth. And a further element of nudge, where you simplify people's choices, make it easier without necessarily communicating directly with them to engineer the outcome you want. And shared, which can be both social, online, and also offline. Any thoughts here about whether is there anything missing there, or this could serve as a useful framework going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We're having this conversation a lot at the moment in terms of how we attract audiences and how we go about it. And you know, for us, we have teams doing all these different things across paid and search and social and earned media. I think what the background to this, and this, I'm not entirely sure this is what the answer you want or looking for, but from our perspective, especially from a paid for perspective, media is becoming really, really expensive. So to run a campaign, similar sort of campaign this year to last year, we're having to ask brands to spend a lot more money just to stand still. So just to acquire or deliver the same year-on-year growth. So that's why I think a lot of brands are looking beyond paid for sort of relationships, paid channels, and they're looking at investing in other ways of sort of attracting and retaining loyalty for customers. So we're seeing a lot of money being spent on user experiences, digital experiences, CRM, ECRM, loyalty programs, and more investment into sort of advocacy and earned relationships. And actually, arguably, they're more loyal anyway. But then how do you, once you've brought them into your organization, how do you then retain that relationship? And that's why you're seeing, you know, certain brands investing more in retaining relationships and driving advocacy through existing relationships than you are through acquiring cold relationships, because the backdrop is inflation of media prices. And, you know, arguably it's the right thing to do anyway, but it's definitely driving a different way for organizations to think about attracting people to it. Is that related to this? I mean, it's...
Yeah, absolutely, totally, because I think what you've highlighted there is that, well, I'm not. So the suggestion is a need for a more integrated approach across different dimensions, and where the current market drivers away from the paid for approach, and like you mentioned there about sort of own, you know, sort of own interactions, own infrastructure, own, as well as I say the nudge and shared, or providing a driver for, you know, a broader approach, a more integrated approach, as opposed to focused on one dimension, perhaps. Okay. And then sort of moving on there, Jim, is about how we your world is created by emergence. And a very simple model here devised by Professor Gareth Loudon of Imperial College London, where you know, creativity consists of like listening, connect, doing. You listen and listen in the broadest sense of the word, connect, do, and it's a constant dynamic with purpose at the heart of it that drives it. The stronger the purpose you have, the more meaning a task has, and the more likely to listen, connect, do at a faster rate. And there's also a need to listen to the bottom up as well as the top down. And also we've witnessed an era where a label was emerged, of comms, which Dublin Conversations believes could be a candidate label for describing our interests bigger than integrated communications, as it includes managing behaviours, purposefulness, and also building social cohesion. And there's a proposal that, as I say, at the moment, there's no sort of industry agreed formal definition of the word comms, but a potential candidate could be how you create confidence to exist, coexist, cooperate, or collaborate by managing perceptions around your future behaviours. And also that there are two significant instincts revealed through the work of sociologists, where identify that 2 out of 3 people will help a stranger, which means 1 out of 3 don't. And there could be sort of 2 prime instincts at work. One of we-led thinking, where the initial response is to think of others first, which could be a foundation stone for potential future public relations practice. And me-led thinking, where you think of self-interest first, which could be a foundation stone for advertising led approach. So just some thoughts there, Jim, about the idea of emergence and comms and these instincts.
I mean, I think thinking about listening, I feel like there's so many ways to listen now. Obviously, that has been primarily been driven by technology and through sort of social media. I mean, there is a sort of danger to that as well, from a sort of reliance on technology and how you interpret data and who is doing that interpretation of that data. So I think, you know, that's interesting, because there's so many tools and ways of going about that. I think confidence is interesting. I think a lot of organisations lack confidence, really. What is the reason for that? I think it depends who's in the room and what kind of personalities are behind an organisation. And I tend to find that, I think, you know, you associate those organisations that are confident are those driven by more founders or entrepreneurs that are able to bring people along with them, rather than organisations that I don't know. I find there's not many confident organisations out there, and even if there are, they tend to be, you know, not confident for too long, because it's driven by a certain individual or person, organisation. I don't really know what to say about we versus me.
Yeah. Okay. What about the issue of comms? I mean, do you use that yourself, or any observations about what you define it as? Or? No problem. We're going to edit this down. And lastly, sort of step 5 is about the society. You know, it's a spectrum of responses to the idea of trust. That there's some people who are distrusting and under-engaged in society, and other people who are over-trusting with a worldview that can lead to at least naivety, but at worst stigma, bias, prejudice. And in order for our world to operate, that we need people to be open to understanding to others, which is at risk at the moment from greater polarization. And so is there a need that when in our working communications, we not only just got to seek to influence, but also be mindful that we need to invest in social cohesion as well, that unless we do so, there's a danger of increasing polarization and increasing risk of a dysfunctional society. So I'm just wondering, any thoughts about that, about whether there needs to be a change of mindset, a change of approach from in work within the communications industry?
Yeah, I think it does come down to the diversity and inclusion challenges that we have as an industry, and then how we actually have we even got the right people in the room right at the start in terms of actually constructing communications programs and knowing how to engage with certain audiences. And you know, we've done a lot of work on this in our work with you know, the England Wales Cricket Board, where we're trying to sort of engage a lot of minority audiences right across the country. And I think that's interesting, understanding for them, it's like trying to better understand generational differences in media consumption in minority audiences. So first generation immigrants are actually pretty polarized, but when you start sort of going down the generations, second, third generations, it's becoming less defined from a media consumption sort of perspective, which I think is interesting. And I think, but I think ultimately it does sort of start with, you know, improving our own diversity. You know, we're 2 white men. I almost say Andy, but you're, but you know, so yeah, I think that's the ultimate challenge we have. Like, how can you best reflect the society outside of you and attract the talent, and therefore improve the content you're creating that it's got a chance of even engaging and driving cohesion outside the organisation? Because You know, I think like we talk about bias within algorithms and technology, it's the same thing on steroids. If you've just got a load of, you know, white people brainstorming and come up with ideas and campaigns to engage audiences around outside the organisation.
So going forward, Jim, I mean, in terms of addressing the Dublin conversations, with taking through 5 steps that potentially could provide an alternative way of looking at things, but how do you feel more confident or interested in the subject about addressing what does better look like in terms of creating a better communications industry that can both do its job better and rise to the challenges? Any thoughts on that, Jim?
Yeah, I think, you know, what this has revealed is that there needs to be more introspective sort of thinking in terms of, like, you know, are you arming yourself with the right information and the right tools, but also the right people to actually think about some of these challenges? Because I think there's that echo chamber danger, isn't there, that actually you yourself define what better looks like.
Yeah.
Without another perspective, you might not even know how to benchmark the impact of the work you're having. And I think that you know, campaigns that are held up for doing great work are equally judged by predominantly the sort of people that we probably need to think about changing in the industry, and you know, the awards panels don't look much different from the people coming up with the ideas, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so with the work of the Dublin conversations, is there one or more things you think we should be doing or doing differently in order to facilitate, you know, what does a world better look like, and how we go forward as an industry?
I think there is a potentially an angle to explore around the use of technology and the algorithms that are powering it, because there will bound to be an unconscious bias on those algorithms. It's wrong to assume that whatever piece of technology tells you is the right approach is the correct one, because they all suffer from some bias. Someone had to code it, someone had to develop it, and that's dependent on the team or that person that was responsible for it. So I think the use of technology and the reliance on it doesn't necessarily spit out a better approach. I think you need to question that as well. That would be interesting.
And then in terms of what things do we need to take to advance our cause? Any suggestions there at all, Jim? If you were us, if you were our agency, what sort of things would you envisage doing to advance the cause of the Dublin conversations?
I think we need to think of comms, and it goes right back to the start, where, you know, you know, we need to break out or think differently from a siloed perspective. It does start with what is the objective, and often, you know, we're increasingly finding that marketing directors or clients that are talking to us don't necessarily care how their objective is achieved, or what the right agency to work with is, and they just want a solution to their problem. And I think increasingly, you know, comms agencies are pitching against ad agencies, against search agencies, against digital experience agencies, because they all have a role to play to some extent in changing behaviours of consumers. So I think, you know, really this shouldn't just apply to comms in a way. It should apply across all marketing services agencies, because they all have a role to play in impacting the sort of stuff that we want to impact.
So, as I say, a future where change is inevitable, even more complexity, but hopefully, as I say, with work with good people like yourself, and hopefully what we're doing here can make a contribution to creating a better place.
That'd be nice.
Jim, massive thanks. I really appreciate you sparing your precious time, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on and about what does better look like there. Thank you very much indeed.
Good luck with it all.